This is the Anastasia Ryzhkova podcast. Ronald Connors is a true artist, and as he referred to himself in this conversation, a fighter. He doesn't wait for the muse to come to him, but he goes out and meets her every morning by his canvas. I hope this conversation inspires you to go after your own creativity. And we're on. Hello. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again. So, this is Ronald Connors, and you have had a very interesting life. Traveled the world. And what did you do before you became an artist? Do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to tell people how I've met you?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, so when I was living in Japan, I went to international school, and I think was it then? I was 16, I think, when you became my history teacher, and you were there in Japan for about 2 years, and then you moved on because you have been hopping countries, being an international teacher in different schools.
That's correct.
That's right. You've actually inspired me to take history as my major at university.
I'm very happy to hear that.
It's been very good, yeah. But then I realized that to have a job as a historian, you either have to be a teacher or a professor in this day and age. Yeah. So now you're living in Vietnam.
Yes, I'm living in Hanoi, Vietnam. I've got an art gallery here in Hanoi, Ron Art Gallery, and that's we just had a soft opening recently, and I'll be opening on a daily basis starting in July, late July, because I'm traveling in Europe. Most of my painting is inspired by my travels, and I will be traveling on a motorcycle.
And you've done that before, right? Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's interesting because there's a lot of wind here,
yes,
and I actually kind of feel like I'm on a motorcycle right now. So,
well, it's the background to your life. It's the soundtrack.
Yeah.
So you've done that before. You've traveled on a motorcycle before. Was it around Southeast Asia that you've done that once?
I traveled. I rode a motorcycle from Great Falls, Montana, which is where I'm from, down to Costa Rica, and that was quite a trip.
Far. How long did that take you?
Ridiculously far. It took me about 20 days longer than if I chose a different motorcycle. I was on a 250 Enduro, and that's not ideal for long distance. But it was great when I was in Central America. And I had earlier taken some rides around the Andes in Peru. I've ridden all over Vietnam. I did a really nice circuit on my Harley Sportster when I was in Japan when I was your teacher.
Yeah.
So that was one of the best rides. It was the craziest because it was in March and it was freezing and there was snow on the side of the road. It starts raining.
So it was challenging.
It was very, very challenging. The desire to quit was just a little less than desire to keep going. So I didn't turn around, and it was quite a journey.
Where did you travel in Japan from? Did you travel from Sendai, Miyagi? That's where we lived. Down to Okinawa or upwards?
No, I went down. I took the non-toll road down to Tokyo, and because it was a holiday, it was horrific.
Yeah.
And then I decided to go inland because I was going to a place called Kanazawa in the south. And when the place that I went across, of course, I was climbing the whole time, and then going through the tunnels, which I used to actually be a little bit afraid of riding through tunnels and this type of thing. And by the end of that ride, I am no longer. I can go in. I could ride a motorcycle in a mine under
Wow.
the ground. I don't care anymore.
I'm not surprised that you couldn't do that before because your love for motorcycles started quite early on, didn't it?
Yeah, I've been riding a motorcycle. I was ridden on a motorcycle when I was probably 5 or 7, around that age.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly. And then we bought our first motorcycles when I was 10, and so we started. I started riding then, and back then it was, I came from a place. There was a guy named Evel Knievel from Butte, Montana, and everybody wanted to be evil, and so that was a big inspiration for me. Was Evel Knievel, and that's what brought me to California also, because you could only ride a certain, 4 months out of the year, really, in Montana. And California, you could ride year round, so I moved down there.
Yeah, Montana gets pretty cold, doesn't it? And then in California, it's always sunny.
Yeah, it's Russia cold.
It's Russia cold, yeah.
Siberia cold.
Yeah, I can't say that I like that cold at all.
I'm pretty done. And another thing, we were having a discussion. I was talking with another motorcycle rider, and I was asking him, would you rather be riding, at a near zero temperature or, at blazing hot?
Yeah.
And both of us agreed that it's much better to be, like almost melting than to be freezing. It's just so uncomfortable. Be cold on the motors because there's no refuge.
There's nothing you can do.
No. And pulling over doesn't help because unless you pull into a hotel or something.
Yeah.
Certainly not anything. But for me, it's been, like I said, it's you'll see in some of my paintings there. I generally, I'm an abstract expressionist.
I was going to ask you that. I knew that's what it was. So because I've seen you've got some expressionist arts and some abstract, impressionist arts and some abstract painting as well. And I do love you. I must say, I do love your impressionist paintings as well. So why that style of painting?
It's I wonder about that myself sometimes. I think that part of it's generational. My father was, when I was growing up, art was a big thing in my family, and my grandfather liked to paint kind of copies of Van Gogh and a Montana artist, American artist named Charles Russell. And my father did more of his own thing, but he really liked the Cubist of Picasso, which I think is also because of his generation. That's kind of what they taught in art at his schools. So I was into that, and I really noticed that one of my art teachers in particular, a fellow named Jerry Rankin, he really seemed to want us to get out of the idea of copying. And I knew it's a bit of an odd thing because I see a lot of the art that the people are really, really trying to get, like, if they're doing this leaf here, they want it to be exactly like this. If they're drawing a picture of my face or their face or someone's face, they want it to be almost like an image from a copying machine. And he kind of noticed that I resented that, and I actually I didn't think of that as art. I almost thought of that as we didn't have copying machines at the time, but I thought, why are you doing that? You could take a photograph.
Yes.
And you're taking a photograph and trying to make it look like a photograph. And I couldn't quite get the sense out of that. Although I do respect talent, I'm not against that. But I just couldn't see the sense. I thought that art was about creating, not copying, not trying to make
expressing what you see in the background, in the image, in the landscape, not necessarily what you expect everyone else to see. but
yeah,
it's your vision.
That's very accurate. Very accurate. Even when I do watercolors, which I do, I do them some very true to the image or somewhat true to the image, but at the same time, I was in Penang in Malaysia, and I was talking with a fellow. Really, his father was a tremendous painter, and I think the son was just as good. But I was asking him, if you could tell me in a very short time, a couple of really good hints or good advice, whatever you want to say, about watercolor, and he said, make sure that you have all of the light colors before, because it's not like oil. You can't put something on top. Once you color over the light, it's done. He said the second thing is, he said, don't worry about the whole picture. He said it's okay to go section by section. He said when you're adding detail, don't worry about it's okay to look at it, as in sections. And then the last thing that he said, and I read this someplace else, I read this someplace as well, and it said, don't be a prisoner to your image.
I love that.
If you're painting from a photograph, it's okay if this tree is on this side. It's okay. The people that are looking at your painting, if you're posting next to a photograph, even then, one would want to see the difference, perhaps. Although some people are quite impressed by it. Oh, wow, he did exactly like that, But I think as an artist, that's a choice for myself.
To do something else. So when you start painting, do you have an image in your head already of what it's going to come out? Okay, so you have an idea, and that's a really interesting question. You obviously you're a creative person yourself. The thing is that I was at a thing where they were talking about how music influences art, and this woman who was also an abstract artist, I guess, she was saying, oh no, I don't do this. I've been doing this for so many years, and I had so much training that I could play anything in the background. And then they asked the piano player to look at the pianist to look at a painting and interpret it musically. And I thought he did quite nicely. And then they asked me to come up and talk, and my response was, I'm absolutely influenced by music. If I was playing Dave Brubeck jazz, I'm pretty sure it would happen different than if I was playing some sort of, Husker Du punk rock or something, right? Yeah.
And aging myself with the musical taste. But
don't worry, I'm going back in time with my musical taste. I find myself listening to music from the 70s and the 60s a lot.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. But that it does, and I like to listen to music while I'm painting. But as far as having an idea in my head, periodically I do. I mean, I will see something. I was driving home, and the way that they hang the paintings at this place. This is the Camellia Lounge in the Melly Hotel in Hanoi.
Yep.
It's got some of my work here. It's an Art Week exhibition, and I was seeing how they had these things hanged, and I thought, oh my goodness, I could do this. And I started, and I'm driving in my car, and I'm reaching into the glove box for a pencil, and I'm slowing down, and I'm almost never I'm not one of those people that texts in the car, but I was looking for this thing, and then I found actually a crayon, and I drew out the thing, and all of a sudden I thought, you're worse than the text people, but I had pulled over by then. And I pulled over because I had this very clear image. But I do sometimes I think have a pretty good idea. But the awful thing is that sometimes, for example, you'll see this. You, I'm sending you the painting. It's called "Color of Wind" Wine Throw.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people tell me, "Oh, that's your masterpiece," and I have. When I don't like to take it out in public, but when I've exhibited it, I've had people standing in front and just. And it's not a big painting. It's about 120 by 80, I think, and centimeters.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people just, they're just amazed. And any time I've tried to reproduce that, it's always been a mess. So I have another one here that I'll also send you. That's it's called "Taking Flight,"
yeah,
and it's from a bird park series. And once again, I was home the other day, and I said, "Oh, just put the background, just do this, that," and I did 3 canvases, and one of them turned out okay. And
mm-hmm.
so, for me, and I think this is why I'm an abstract expressionist, is that I can't get myself. When I'm creating, when I'm painting, I can't get myself to stick to something.
Yes.
Like I want to make that,
And it's moving,
yeah,
towards something else then. Well, you've mentioned that, so your color of the wind, wine throw, is it? You said that you were hesitant to show it to the public. Is that correct?
Well, I had it in a small exhibition in Bangkok. And it was created in Bangkok, actually. And then maybe 4 years ago. And then I had several people make this commentary, and so I left it there. And then I started worrying about it because it's got a white background and those things. One has to be careful with their things. It's pretty easy to. I had one painting in I won't name the place, but I don't know how. But it got it was a really beautiful yellow with this turquoise, and now it looks like it's just like something's almost like something's grown on it or something, and
right, yeah. So you got to be careful with the colors and
it's possible to clean, but it's one thing that I'd rather not do, and I'll eventually probably pay someone to do it. Because it's a really odious process. You're sitting there thinking, I created this, and this person just stuck it here. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there was smoke or what was the deal, but it was like somebody was towing it behind their car or something.
That's a real shame. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be, because it's I don't want to say that it's a lot of work, because for me it's a lot of pleasure. It's a lot of passion, maybe a bit of an obsession. But the reality is there's only maybe 10, maybe 20% of the work that I do myself that I really love.
Yes.
So when there is something that I love, it's really it's painful when
I think it's the mind of the artist, though, isn't it? That you never really feel like the painting is complete, or that your piece of art is finished, or that you like it. And I think it's really hard to overcome that. How did you overcome that anyway? So you started you started your own gallery, but that wasn't the case before. You weren't showcasing your art.
No, that's true. What happened was all my life I've done one thing or another, and in art. And I remember when I was a kid, I made this newspaper jacket, and it was in this exhibition, and the that same teacher, Jerry Rankin, he asked me to sit behind this temporary wall and listen to the comments, and I was really amazed and baffled, because these people were talking about it as though it was this amazing work, and I thought somewhat ordinary. But then I walked around myself in the exhibition, and I realized it was actually extraordinary. I'm not saying it was great, but it was extraordinary. It was way different than everything else. And then I just was doing art, and then when I was in Thailand about almost 10 years ago, and this was actually a painting I had in Japan. And I made it here in Hanoi in probably 2004. And this guy, we had a party at my house, and it was in my bedroom, and they went to put their daughter to sleep. And the wife came out, she was talking to the husband, and he came up to me and he said, who did that painting? And I said, it's like, I did, because I thought he was going to say it's a mess or something, or my daughter does stuff like that. You hear stuff like that. His daughter's like 4. And he said, we want to buy it. And I was just like, whoa. And I didn't know the guy very well. And it turned out he's from Ireland. Well, I knew he was from Ireland, but he was a curator. And he offered me a pretty good sum of money for it. And I thought, well, I didn't connect the fact that he had this car and this big house and everything with the fact that he was actually rich. And so I was thinking, that's too much money. And I ended up losing the thing. But then I went to his house and I noticed that he had hundreds and hundreds of pieces and very expensive pieces. He had probably a couple $1 million worth of art in his house in Bangkok. And then I started thinking a little bit more. I started thinking, well, geez, this guy, it didn't work at this time, but somebody appreciated that. So I started putting some of my stuff out in my own house rather than hiding it. And the cleaner actually started putting these things up. Thank you. And I said, and I started thinking more about it. And then when I was in Montana after taking these trips, my mother, who always has said to me, you don't ever forget you're an artist and things like this. And
that's nice.
Yeah, it was good. It is. She always said that. When I was making quite a bit of money in this one job, and I was selling actually luxury cars, and she wasn't impressed with the money. She said that to me, and I thought, that's awful, because most parents, if their kid's doing art, they tell them to go get a job,
Yes, I know.
Yeah, but and the bad thing is about our families, we never had money, so I mean, it was almost like, hey, Mom, give me a chance to make some money. But anyway, when I was home in Montana, in between these rides, my mother was asking me, where did you do your best art? And I thought about it for a little bit, and I said, Hanoi, Vietnam. And she said, go back there. Go back there. She said, you're at an age where from now on, everything that you don't do, you're going to regret. When you're younger, you get do-overs. You get these things. But she said, it's kind of a now or never deal. And I thought, she's right. And I did do some good work at the Art University, the Fine Arts University. A lot of it in lacquer painting, which I learned here, but I don't do any at all at this time. But I did a lot of oils back then. I had a really nice studio in my house. And then the art gallery came because I had a 3-story house and it was full. And people came over to my house and they're like, whoa, you buy a lot of paintings. It's like, no, I don't buy any at all. And then, crazily enough, I broke my leg, and people were coming over to my house to visit me, to wish me good health or whatever. And a lady bought something, and I was like, "Wow, you really want that?" She said, "I really want that. This thing." Great. And so then I had people coming over, and they were asking me about this, and actually taking a tour of my house, and I couldn't do anything about it
because you had a broken leg. So it was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, and so they would go up the stairs, and I would be yelling at them, explaining to them because it was very nicely done the way that it was arranged.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have 3 pieces that I never finished that were supposed to go in that house. And it's a shame that I did break my leg. That wasn't why they didn't get finished, but it was like you say, a blessing in disguise. And then I moved to a smaller house in a different place, and I started thinking about this. But actually, let me go back a step. Before I moved, I was visiting a friend in Thailand, and this was before I broke my leg, actually. And I was showing him some paintings on my. I'm just showing him some things, and he said, "Wow, that's great." He said, "You should tell this guy. He's got a gallery." And I was like, "Ah, that's okay." And the guy was standing behind me, and he said, "Wow, you've got a lot of work." He said, "I want to show it."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Really?" So I was shuttling back and forth between Bangkok and Hanoi for about a year, and sales-wise, not much, but it was very. It's nice because I felt more. Sometimes like creating, because I had when I was in Bangkok, I didn't have all those paintings hanging around, so I would make new things.
Mm-hmm.
And then going back, like I said, then I moved to a smaller house, and it was one of these things where people kept coming in, and no matter how you sliced it, it was a house with a lot of paintings. And
yeah.
I had a couple of exhibitions there, and it was obvious that the people didn't truly think of it as someplace, I knew you were, your studio would look like this. And then I got into this Domino Art Fair, which is the biggest art fair here in Vietnam. And I just had a couple pieces in it, but then I started thinking a little bit more seriously. And then I decided, and I started looking at it. It was about a year that I was looking. Got the building, and then started. Took about 6 months. Which, if someone goes in there and they think, "Oh, you could have done this in a couple of days, maybe," but it's not as easy as people think. There's a lot of
work that goes into setting up.
It's just a ton of work.
Yeah.
You're just and it's. I was visiting my friend he lives in Bellagio in Italy, right on Lake Como, and he's very. I think he's a great artist. He's a impressionist, and Jerry Frazier. He was a professor of mine in the university. And I was watching him set up his gallery, and I was just thinking, man, they go to his house and they just think, oh my God, this is like a romantic, amazing lifestyle. Those people don't pick up the paintings and put them in the back of the car and, have to adjust this and then find a painting that has a hole poked in it from a screw that you didn't realize was on the painting from hanging it. And, then and it never happens to something that you're going to paint over. It happens to the thing that you really love. And you just like, geez, so it's a very conscious decision.
Work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that for such a long time, so many people have been saying that your paintings are amazing, that they want to buy it, and you just kept trying not to listen to that.
Yeah. Like I say, I think it is. There is a lot of romance involved in creating. And there's a lot of work. It's like I was telling someone the other day that for me the word hope is synonymous with work, and
yeah.
I didn't truly realize that until I realized that every time I said something in that gallery about, I hope, then I ended up doing work to make it occur.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized that, there's no, even the show here.
Mm-hmm.
They've the Melia Hotel here. Like I said, it's got the Rolls Royce dealership down there. It's a luxury hotel, and they've got a great lounge here. And just this fellow had this great idea, and then we were the two. A fellow named Ding Vu, who's a tremendously talented Vietnamese artist.
Mm-hmm.
He and I shared the stage for the first showing,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just really impressed with the fact that these people had never done it before, but they were intelligent and creative enough to just to have that vision and understand that. You're like, I hope we can do this, and then
Mm-hmm.
making it, working to do it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work to do anything creative, really. You can have an idea, but that's why I think you shouldn't really be getting into anything that your heart is not in, because once you realize, okay, I really want to do this, this is what I want to do with my life, that's when the work stops becoming work. Yes, it's hard, but this podcast, I didn't realize it would take such a long time to set it up.
No, it's true. I'm impressed with you and what you're doing with your poetry, because
Thank you.
I really love what you're writing, and I love what your focus.
Thank you.
That's something people don't. Here's another thing. I get up almost every morning at 5 is late for me, and I will do a watercolor in the morning, and I don't always finish. But I will sit down and I will work, and it's not an abstract piece, it's something else, but I think that it's a really good and happy way to begin my day.
Yes.
It's a very soul cleansing experience on a daily basis. It really is.
And you can't wait for the muse to come to you. You got to go and meet her. I can't remember who said that. I know you've said that as well, that you told me that you don't wait for the muse to come by. You just sit down and you start working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was something too, and this was a funny thing. This was before I broke my leg also. But I was I had a swimming pool at this house, and I would get up in the morning, and it was wintertime here, so the water was really, really cold.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get up about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I would dive into the pool, and I used to say I got these ideas, but I went in there, and it was freezing, and I would go back and forth and back and forth, back and forth, until I really felt that my mind, that anything, because sometimes you wake up and you think, oh, this happened to me, or that's happening, some money issue or relationship issue. And I would go in that thing and I'd be freezing. Mm-hmm. And I would be staying there until I really got to the point where I had nothing in my mind.
Yeah.
And then I would go upstairs and I would start painting, and I was still freezing. And I would stand there and I would leave the doors open and stuff, and just go for it. And
wow, that's a tough character you have.
Yeah, well, it's discipline, and I said, like, I take discipline over inspiration any day, because discipline can get me by the times when I don't have inspiration.
Yeah.
And
it's a very good quote.
Yeah, but on this, I remember there was this one day, and I had been to a party, and this fellow was talking to me, and he was really, I didn't go out a lot, and I didn't talk to people about, but he just kept asking me, because someone else introduced me as an artist. And I finally said to him, I told him what I just told you. Mm-hmm. And he was not impressed. In fact, he was like, hey, did you hear that? Did you hear that? And he was telling some other people, and I also of a sudden felt like I was part of my own exhibit or something, that everyone was, like looking at me as, this thing. And I went home that night, and I tried not to paint.
Mm-hmm.
And I got up and I did the same thing. And it was a Saturday, I remember. And I got up in the morning, and I was just like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I got to stop this. It's an obsession, because I had heard them say that word,
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was just saying, this isn't a passion. It's an obsession. And I went downstairs and I opened up my computer and I turned on Facebook or something. And here was this guy, this Conor McGregor. He's a fairly famous, well, he's very famous, I guess, UFC fighter.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Conor McGregor.
Yeah, Conor McGregor. And his quote was, "I'm not talented, I'm obsessed."
Yeah.
And if he was there, right there, I would have just hugged the guy. I mean, it was like I opened this thing and there it was. And I think that's what happens a lot in life, if people are willing to recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the guy. He doesn't know me. He's not, he's not saying that to me. He's saying that to everybody or whatever. But I think that, these things, if you open your mind and open your heart.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, now this is the first podcast that I've mentioned him now, but so that people know how much I like him. Carl Jung has coined this word synchronicity. And synchronicity means that you are in alignment with whatever you're supposed to be doing, and then you see all the signs everywhere from random places that you didn't expect to see. And he was a psychiatrist, so he thought of it as an interesting phenomena, but unfortunately he didn't live long enough to study it more. But that happens to me as well. Like when I started publishing my writing, I could see signs.
Yeah, and it was interesting because he was fighting for the title with the guy named Jose Aldo.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the greatest fighters of all time. And I remember I was up painting, and I had made like my whole plan around that weekend to watch that fight. And I was up there painting again, and all of a sudden I started this thing, and I had this incredible idea, and I was just going, and I had this yellow background, and I realized, hey, wait a second. That guy's fighting. Conor McGregor's fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran down the stairs down from the third floor. I turned this on. It was on Fox Sports 1, I think. And I turned it on just in time to see them, like, I think they didn't touch gloves. And it ended up being a knockout. I think it was 13 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just jumping up and down, and I ran back up, and I took a black thing, and I made this image of Conor McGregor, which is probably the worst painting of him ever.
Well, we can't know that yet. I'll have a look. Is it called Conor McGregor, that painting?
Yeah, if you can recognize it. But but I did that, and I thought of, and afterwards I ran back down there to hear him speak, talking on the thing. But it was just it's one of those things, and we can get inspiration from wherever. I mean, he's an artist himself. I mean, he's a mixed martial artist, and those fighters, they train and all. Tremendous discipline.
I mean, that's amazing what they do every day.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to be, I think, a fighter. And from what I've seen and what I've heard about these fighters, especially UFC, well, I've only seen UFC fighters, I guess. Right. They're so calm. They're so
they're amazing.
Yeah.
My cousin, actually, I haven't seen him for many years, so I it's not like I'm name dropping here, but Scott Kent, he's the CEO of Lion Fights, which is a big Muay Thai organization.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping this summer when I'm in London, I'll be able to see one of his fights, because they put on great shows. And but yeah, those guys also. When I was in Thailand, I was so impressed. I trained in Muay Thai like 2 or 3 times only, and I did wrestling and things when I was younger. But I was just tremendously impressed, like you said, with their toughness.
Mm-hmm.
Their just absolute toughness. This guy was pounding on him, and I think he wanted us to go 60%. He thought I was doing more than that, and he just stuck his leg up on my neck, just
Wow.
hard enough, But I mean,
Wow.
it just came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden I've got a leg on my neck and a foot behind my head. And he says, I can hit pretty hard too. And he pulls down like this, and so it was him telling me to, chill out and work more on a technique, which earlier he'd been telling me to hit him harder. But anyway, yeah, they're tremendously tough people, and I think that's what I try to be as an artist. I see, and I don't mean to be an outsider or a critic of other artists or their styles or anything like that, but I sometimes, I see, now we have Facebook, and a lot of people post their work, which is wonderful, share their beauty. But I see some of these artists, it's almost like they have a film crew following them. They've got these epic poses, of them doing this and that and the other thing. And I just, I see this, and then I see kind of a clannish atmosphere, and it's always existed. If we read about Van Gogh, and he wanted to go have all these artists come to this area in France, and I can't remember which. I think only one guy came, and I can't remember who it was. So I don't want to. But being a history person, I don't want to be inaccurate. Right?
Yeah.
But I did. It's always been kind of cliquey and clannish, I guess, or whatever you want to say. The certain groups of people, they're very interested only in the style that their local artists make or something like this. And fair enough. That's good for them. It's what they see every day, and that's what they want to see. But I think that in a certain way, I think I'm more like a fighter than an artist. In that sense, yeah. I go out there. I do battle with those paintings. People sometimes they think that like abstract is all he does is throw this stuff on there. That is so far from the truth. I throw my whole heart out there. I put my soul on those things, and I fight the whole way through. And I lose a lot. I lose a lot. And when I do lose, I do learn. I see that it doesn't mean that I mean that when you make a good painting and people say it's good and everything like that, that's easy.
Yeah.
But there's these other things that you just know didn't work, and it doesn't matter how many people tell you it's good or you did a good job or something like that. You lost. And there's a different thing between losing and getting beaten.
Yeah.
If you lose, it's your fault. If you get beaten, it's because you have a greater opponent. And sometimes when like I've got a big canvas at home and started a while back and back and forth, and I just can't get it to work.
Yeah.
It's a long battle, and it's one of those things. And I know I had a show, and these people came in. They said, "Oh yeah, I see this," and it's like I went to the one. It's like the Sydney Opera House. And I was like, no, it has nothing to do with that. It's not even close to finished, but I can't move it out of the way because I don't have the space. But no, it is. It's a battle. Another quote of mine kind is I don't paint to fill a space on a wall. It's to fill a space in a soul.
Wow, that's strong. I like that one.
Thanks. Yeah. But I always hope people love what they see, not just like, oh wow, I'll buy this.
Well, what do you hope that people will see? It's more like it's more than they see. It's how it makes you feel, right? I think I've heard somewhere. I've been really getting into walking around museums because for me, art inspires art. So looking at other people's paintings and other people's art, like you said, music, that inspires me to write. So and I've heard someone say, you shouldn't look at all the paintings in the museum. You should just look at the ones that stop you.
Yeah.
Right. So.
I think that's very correct. I mean, that's that's kind of a roadmap or something, which I don't always like, because sometimes you pass something up, and if you spent a little bit more time in front of it, you might have got what the, you know. And I'm not talking about just the interpret. I was at an art museum, and this fellow, he's a math teacher, and his kids were there, and I was trying to tell them that, you know, they were, you know, because of the way they're taught in art school, they're looking at the perspective and everything. And I asked them the question. I said, where do you think the artist wanted you to enter?
Wow, that's a good question, to enter.
Yeah, to enter the, and they're, you know, I said, but, you know, because you guys talk about perspective. I said, but look at this. You got these people. I was showing them a direction. And I don't truly know that artist intended that, but I do know that the kids who were looking at it, they looked at it and appreciated it a bit more, because rather than just saying, this is a picture of a bunch of people working in a field, they saw that there was an entrance to the field, there was actually a gate, and it wasn't in the middle, it was over here, and these people went this way, and there was a direction and everything. And there was, you know, there was an organization, but it was at the same time somewhat chaotic, because they're, you know, it's a rural area, and it was a picture of a rural area in Vietnam. It wasn't one of these machine worked fields in Montana, you know, with the big combine or something. So
it was all done by people, right? Yeah.
But yeah, it's a friend of mine, a friend from Montana. He sent me a quote about what people want to see in art, and I can't even remember the author, but people do like some familiarity. You know, they like to see something they recognize. This fellow, he told me this thing looked like a forest fire, and so I named it. And then it turned out that it wasn't the picture or the painting that I thought he was talking about. And then when he went to put the sticker on it, and I was like, wow, that's amazing.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And I couldn't change it, couldn't change it up, because I already had the thing online for sale. And yeah, it was, but people do, they like to find some comfort. But I think for myself, I can't, I go back again. It was a high school art teacher, actually, that he was kind of trying to get us to understand that, being excellent, like being able to draw exactly this thing,
precise.
Yeah, that's what a good artist does. But a great artist takes something and they create something that has never been seen before, that has never maybe even been thought, and that at some point, one must come to terms with that. I mean, I may never sell another painting for the rest of my life. I don't know this. I may never find another situation where people. Sorry, there's.
That's okay. If you background noise.
There is a. This is funny, because another time I was doing something similar to this, and the Emperor of Japan showed up at the Sheraton here, where I have some work.
Yeah.
And I had to go stand because you can't get with 100 meters of the guy, and then I was telling people later, you should, the Japanese people, if they knew that the emperor had seen these paintings, they'd buy them up. But they, and then everybody wants photographic evidence, and you're like, what was I, was I supposed to show that he had his eyes open when he walked by?
Yeah.
you know, and they wouldn't let me take a photo. So, but
that's a pretty good compliment if he has looked at your paintings, even.
Yeah, it's weird too, though. I was mentioning this to a person, and the guy said, yeah, but you didn't buy anything." I was like, you know, I don't think the Emperor of Japan was on a shopping trip.
Yeah, well, with all respect to Japan and the Japanese people, he is a person, after all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was silly.
Yeah, you mentioned this quote where you mentioned this question that you asked, and you said, "Where does the artist want you to enter, and where are you inviting your audience?"
Yeah, that's something, because some of the paintings, when people see them, you're looking straight on, but I learned a little bit of this. I had a friend in university named Frank Groh, and Frank Groh, he had these things where he would put these three-dimensional objects hanging from the roof, from a ceiling, and then you had to stand in a certain place, and then it became a two-dimensional picture.
Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm.
It's very
That's
tremendously.
Amazing. Wow.
And one of the worst thing was that you would go to one of his shows, and people would be looking at the little pieces and stuff, and you'd have to bring them back and put them in, you know, there was a coffin, for example. You have to stick them in the coffin so that they can see that it's a two-dimensional.
Oh, amazing. Thing. What a mind.
Yeah, amazing mind. And that's why we got along, because he started telling me about it. And we were born, Jesus, I think a day apart. But we were, he was visiting. He was a friend of my roommate, and then he and I became friends. But he was explaining this thing to me, and I started telling him, "Oh, you know what you could do?" And he was just blown away. He said, "You know," he said, "you could probably tell from my lack of enthusiasm that I have done this so many times and no one ever understands." And he says, "And you've taken this concept to a different level." And I said, "Well, I didn't really." I said, "You did, but you took me to a different level."
It's the whole idea of bouncing ideas of each other and bouncing. I guess that's what conversations are for.
Yeah. And so that's one of the things about when doing the painting. I mean, I do some sculpture and some things like that. And I actually am going to hang something similar to what he did, kind of in homage to him. He's still alive, I'm just saying. Homage to his art. But I think that some of the way that I add sometimes light to the painting, some of the, you know, adding these specks of white and things, I really want the person to come in and just almost see it like some of them I want them to stand directly in front and watch the image explode. And then there's other ones that I want them like to walk by and come back and forth and stand in different places, which you see people doing in an art gallery sometimes because they've been trained or something. But I hope that some of the way that it really does. I've had a couple of people, only a couple of different works. They're part of this thing. They're called the Ghosts of Dakar. It's another series, and it's inspired by riding at night. Because at night you never have sufficient light on a motorcycle when you're riding outside of a populated area. And you see these things, and there's ghosts out there, and there's little, you know, you can see the eyes of animals that are just, and you can't even imagine what kind of an animal it is. So it's just like a hood or something. And that's what those are. And I think that I want the people to recognize that they're moving. They're moving into the future. Just like I did when I saw, you know, when I was riding in Baja California. I was probably only doing about 50 miles an hour, 50, 55. And all of a sudden, it was pure black, and I saw two little dots, and I realized there was a cow on the road. And I missed him it was so fortunate that he heard me and turned around, because I missed him by inches. And
wow.
I've never lost that image. And when I've been riding, after I after that, I was a little bit more, I don't know about cautious, but I recognized that I actually saw him before I saw the two little eyes. I saw this very dark thing.
Yeah.
But I didn't recognize it. I recognized it as darkness. But in fact, it was
an animal. A cow.
Yeah, it was an animal.
Wow.
It was twice as dark as the night.
Yeah. Interesting. That's an interesting metaphor, actually, I think, to life in general, because you're going into a direction and you're kind of in the darkness, right? And then you don't know where you're going. You can recognize a few things in the future, but you don't know what you're going to see next. Yeah.
That's very true. And a solid object like that, which in the daytime reflects light, and so we see them as this thing, this being of color, but at night, in fact, it intercepts the light. Like, you could see the stars, and then here was this piece of darkness that was blacking out the stars. And of course, it's a solid object to count. And so, in fact, I'm certain that my eyes saw him, but my brain did not interpret it as an object, but rather as darker darkness. So, and like you're saying about a metaphor, sometimes the things that are the most real are the things that we can't get ourselves to see.
That are hiding in the dark. Those are some amazing quotes you've thrown out there today. That's really cool. Well, I just want to say we have been talking for about an hour.
Yeah, that's a good time to stop, I think.
I know, yeah, and it has been really amazing to catch up with you, and I'm so glad I talked to you about your art and what inspires it. So, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I just like to say good night and love everybody. It's and people should be peaceful, and it is a shame when you see. I remember I was at an art show, and they were interviewing me when I was there was a particular thing going on in the America, United States of America, and I remember I had said, I hope I can. There's a lot of ugliness in the world, and hopefully maybe you can create some beauty to battle that. And that's one of the. It's probably, I think it is the reason that that it is such an obsession for me, that I do see that there's a need, and I think there's a need for all of us to create something.
I think so.
The only way.
I think so. I think we all have that in us, and it's all just about tapping into it.
Absolutely.
Into your creativity. Well, thank you so much for this, and I hope we'll catch up with you soon again.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, have a good day. Bye.
All right.